your granddad died, you were sad, but your emphasis was on, what was it on? You know,
he's going to heaven.
Yeah, that excited you more than you were upset, didn't it?
Yeah.
And in some ways that's a lovely way to be able to view the world, isn't it? Rather than to be, you know, I mean, do you understand people getting so upset when someone dies?
Well, not everyone goes.
No.
Well, yeah, I understand it. Yeah, I do understand it. Although I don't understand it when people get upset about someone who dies who they hardly know, really.
Yeah.
Because they hardly see them anyway, you know.
Yeah. But how do you think an autistic person copes with emotion? And, you know, because some people say that autistic people don't have emotion.
Oh, well, that's rubbish, really.
Yeah.
They actually have quite strong emotions, but just, again, going back to, you know, differences, they just experience in a very different way.
Yeah, so what would those different ways be? I mean, would you cry?
I personally, me for one, hardly cry at all.
No. And would you want a hug?
No.
No.
Exactly. No, I don't.
So how would someone comfort you if you were upset?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. Certain comforts, like, you know, the comforts that some people take, like, you see, it's not, and all that, and taking a hug and all of that. That is just, I don't want all of that. Certain, like, you know, times when I'm upset and things like that, I just want to be left alone and I want to handle it myself.
Yeah.
But other times, like, you know, when I get really anxious when I've made a mistake. Almost any kind of mistake. And I relate it to my condition. I quite like it when if people like comfort me by saying stuff like, it's not, plenty of people do things like that. I've done things like that all the time. You know, that makes me feel much better. Rather than being like, oh, it's all right.
Yeah.
You know, and all that.
Yeah.
But I don't want all this emotional comfort.
Yeah, and I suppose if I asked you, you know, if somebody, like if you love Sooty, your dog, if something happened to Sooty and you were upset, how would you want someone to comfort you with something like that?
I wouldn't really want it. I'd want to be left alone.
You'd want to be left alone. So what you're saying is that you want people to talk to you and support you about some of your anxieties. But when it comes to emotion of someone dying or something.
That's kind of, to me, that's my own personal feelings, you know, so it should be left to myself.
Yeah, and it doesn't really help you. And do you think you find it hard to deal with those sort of things?
It depends on the thing.
Yeah. It's quite difficult, isn't it? It's, you know, individuals with autism find it very hard to talk through their feelings in terms of when they lose someone or when they're sad in some way. And you find that hard as well. You just have to deal with it in your own way. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think you feel any less deeply than other people?
Even when I'm upset?
Yeah.
Well, again, it depends on what I'm upset about. I'd say when someone's died, I definitely feel less upset about it than other people do.
Yeah.
Always, pretty much.
Yeah.
But other times, I'd say one of the things which makes me upset is when when someone's like patronised me, when I feel like I've made a fool of myself.
Yeah.
Well, then I do sometimes like share it with other people. Or sometimes I kind of just like, I just wish that I could just do a lot more in life. I just wish that I could just get on in life with no trouble.
Yeah.
And that kind of makes me a bit upset, but I don't really share that with people.
No. So it's just mixed. Alex, remember a couple of years ago when your dad had a stroke and he lost his language, and
yes,
we had to teach him to read again and to speak, and you had quite an unusual reaction to that, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, I guess I was, you know, it kind of did feel like, you know, I was talking to someone who wasn't my dad, but at the same time, I kind of liked it. Because he was now struggling with language the same way that I used to be.
Yeah.
So that kind of made me feel like, oh yeah, there's someone else now who is who kind of has a lot of difficulties. He struggled with language and lots of other things. In fact, in certain things, certain things, not things period, but certain things he found harder than I do.
Yeah.
And that made me feel better still. And it kind of made me excited when he was being given the same therapies that I've been given. Kind of like, it was almost like me seeing him going through the progress that I've gone through.
Yeah.
But the thing is, he went through it a lot. He actually kind of, got past it a lot quicker than I did, which I wasn't, which I wasn't really that
happy with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought, I kind of felt like, and now he's still, it still affects him a bit, this stroke, but he is more like, he's just gone back to being, a dad now. He's not really affected by the stroke much at all.
Yeah. And in a sense, it's you're still having the same difficulties that you had, and in some ways, have you found that quite hard?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, some people would say that's quite a strange reaction. You should have been sad when your dad had a stroke. What do you think of that?
Well, yeah, I get it. Truth be told, it's not quite like... it was kind of, a bit sad to see him have a stroke. It was kind of... it kind of just felt good as well.
Yeah. Because I suppose there's someone in your family who maybe now has a better understanding of... because I know your dad still finds some of the things you find difficult. He still finds, like in a room, executive function, and in a room where there's lots of conversation, he can't really process it, and you find lots of conversation difficult.
A lot of people seem to find it hard to hear what you're saying, and when there's like loads of people speaking.
Yeah, but that's and your dad doesn't get on very well with groups anymore, does he? Like conversation in a group. And you don't really like conversations in a group, do you?
No, I really struggle when everyone's speaking to each other.
Yeah.
No, I'm basically just in the corner, just most of the time, just not saying anything. Really.
Do you think that like these different reactions to things are sometimes people with autism get judged by others as being unkind or harsh?
They possibly get judged for being, maybe a bit like I'm a bit insensitive.
Yeah, but you can't help the way you see the world.
No, it's just the way I think.
Yeah, and maybe you see as being a bit more like you, having some of your difficulties isn't a negative thing. It's just the way a person is. I don't know. It's so it's just an interesting insight, isn't it, into how a person with autism might cope with a family trauma.
Yeah.
Of
course, we can't speak for everybody.
Yeah.
Some autistic people, they possibly get extremely, upset when when their dad has had a stroke, or when their granddad has died or something. I'm not speaking for everybody, but for me personally, it's not as...
No, you're just, this is exciting, and my dad's, remember when we all had to teach him to read and things? How did you feel about that?
Yeah, it's kind of like, yeah.
And he had to do the balancing board, and he had to do he did all the Audi blocks, and we all joined in with that, didn't we?
Yeah.
And it was quite it was exciting to be part of that, wasn't it, as well?
Yeah.
And watching your dad have therapy.
Yeah.
So Alex, thinking back to before your granddad died, when he was in a coma, and I think he was just breathing, but and we said, Alex, do you want to go and visit Grandad? He's in a coma. And what was your reaction?
I was kind of like, why? What's the point? He's only lying down. What's the point of just going to see Grandad just lying down, just breathing with his eyes closed? What's the point? Because it's not as if you can talk to him or anything. You might as well, if you're going to do that, you might as well just imagine that you see him. And it's going to bring far more negatives going than staying.
Yeah. So I suppose, is that because, I mean, why do you think people, want to go and visit someone who's in a coma? You don't know?
I'm not sure, but yeah, I mean, I don't really know
No.
that well.
No. You see, I would want to go and visit. I mean, my granddad and my own grandmother were both in a coma with a stroke before they died, and I wanted to go and see them and hold their hand and try and talk to them, just in the slightest hope that maybe they knew I was there. But I suppose you don't see that. You only see that it's maybe a different response.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can't really understand why you'd want to do that.
Well, I suppose. I guess if you want him to hear your voice.
Yeah.
And to know if you think there's a possibility that he could still hear you, I suppose I can understand it.
Yeah. But you don't really think. I suppose, yeah.
No.
Well, thank you for answering these questions, Alex, and it's been really interesting to talk to you.